Deanna, we're trying to jump into the 6 working geniuses, and I've been recently introduced to that, but you have been thinking about it for a while. Where did you first get introduced to it, and why were you gravitating toward the 6 working geniuses model in particular?
For sure. So Alan, he showed it to me. He's like, "Hey, let's just read this book." Apparently, like Navs is using it, and like it really works for teams. And I think it could just like help our dynamic, and you get to learn a little bit more about yourself as you're developing and you're new on staff. And so I was like, "Okay, sick." And I'm the type to like those type of like assessments and just like getting to know yourself better and like being able to work more efficiently and things. I was like, this is great. This is perfect. So it wasn't a lot on like the spiritual development end, but it was very much like in terms of like what I really like to do or not like to do. So I started getting into that and we just really just read it for fun. Really, it wasn't like any prescribed, we didn't have to, but I realized I was like, wait, this is actually so helpful. And so I started telling everyone about it and I was like, "I wanna know what your working geniuses are," and they would tell me, and I'll be like, "Oh, so this is what you're good at, and this is what you're not." And yeah, there's just so many people where they were saying, "Oh, this is crazy. I didn't know that about myself. No wonder my work is like draining me," or "No wonder like what I can do this all day," type of thing. So yeah, I would say that's when I started dabbling a little bit
Yeah, I've
more.
noticed InterVarsity especially, maybe a lot of different groups do this, but we love our different like evaluations, so I've done everything. I've done the Myers-Briggs and Strength Finders and Enneagram and
Mhm,
but for me, the working genius, it's all pulling a lot from the same sort of approach of like, what's your personality? But this one felt more practical. Like I could actually
mhm.
see how I operate out of these working geniuses in real time in a way that it took a few steps to kind of really apply some of those other personality tests. So they're good. They kind of come at it from different angles. But I think I just resonate with what you said. It felt like it was practical and especially for like a team setting to see. Okay, well, I took the assessment fairly recently, and maybe I could even share it.
Yeah, I like got a chance to like
Possibly.
briefly look.
See
I
if
think you
this
had like
works.
wonder, innovation.
Right. So then I'll pull up. This is my working genius. So
Nice.
they use the image the acronym widget, WIDGET. I don't know how uh, normal this is, but mine kind of follows directly in order. I landed like so you uh, from my understanding, it's your two like highest strengths, and then working competencies is in the middle, and then the things that are going to frustrate you are at the end. But like
Mhm.
as you see this working genius, my results, what how would you initially approach this? What do you notice as someone who's thought about this?
Yeah. I mean, right off the bat, I'm like, okay, if I'm thinking about some sort of project, you're probably at the typically at the helm of it, and you're just like, okay, guys, this is what I'm thinking. Here are all my ideas, and then later on, it's like, okay, like maybe we can get this to work. But I don't exactly know how. And so then having a team come around and like do all those things is probably helpful for you. But at the same time, I don't know if it necessarily resonated with you. Sometimes it could be like, huh, that was actually surprising or not. I don't know. What would you say? Would you say that it was pretty accurate or?
This it feels pretty accurate. But when you get to the frustration part, it stings a little bit because maybe my pride. I just wish that I was perfectly competent at everything. But then as I actually start to play it out, I'm like, oh yeah, it's the tenacity. Actually finishing projects, I would much rather be in the like dream world. I love coming up with new ideas, and then having someone really strong on my team who actually loves dotting all the i's and getting everything actually done is great. So this does
Yes.
actually resonate pretty well. I'm sure maybe like one or two of the letters might rotate, but yeah, maybe before even unpacking mine as you were saying it, so explain to me the 3 different categories as you understand them. So they do it as genius,
Sure.
competency, and frustration. What's that all about?
Right. So the genius is things that you could do for a long time without really getting tired or frustrated because it just gives you joy, it just gives you energy. And then the competency is like you might be skilled at it, like you might have a good amount of training and you can do it. Um, and you might have the tools and you know what resources to look for to help you with it, but like you're not you could it's not your preference, if you were to choose between 2 tasks and one was your genius and one was your competency. So, yeah, I think in here it's like you're capable, but you don't mind doing it, but you don't mind not doing it either. So, and then the frustration is you do it for like 10 minutes and not it's not working for you. It's draining you immediately. So, it says, yeah, you're not naturally gifted, but so a lot of people might think, "Oh, these are just like your weaknesses or whatever," but it's more than just like just weaknesses. I wouldn't really necessarily call it weaknesses, but um yeah, it's just something where when you start doing it, if someone even just asks you, "Hey, can you do this sort of task?" you immediately like just your body might even react to it a little bit. So, that's how I would
Yeah, that makes
understand it
sense.
at least.
So even like I was trying to understand the difference between, is it the G is galvanize and the E is enable. And those felt like they were similar in some ways, but I have competency of galvanizing, which is I don't mind rallying people and inspiring them to take action. But then enablement is not naturally gifted at uh, providing others with encouragement and assistance. And so, as I see that, I do like, I find myself casting vision and I think in that galvanizing role. And so, okay, we got to do this. We're going to do this outreach, and giving that more kind of like spiritual energy, vision casting is great. But when it gets down to, oh, I have to actually walk with someone and keep them on task and keep encouraging them and give them new uh, tools to use, that's where my energy gets drained. Like I have to really dig deep to do that. And partly maybe it's my own personality, but I don't like feeling like I'm being micromanaged in any way. And I would
Mhm.
rather people just say, here's the task and I'll check in with you next year. like um and so maybe there's part of that. Like I feel like I'm becoming a micromanager if I step into the enablement too much. But that's really
Mm.
just up in my head. Like some people really need and thrive on that. So,
Mhm. That's super
yeah.
interesting. So I have enablement as my competency and galvanizing as my frustration.
Okay.
For me, actually, I don't like convincing people that they need to do something. So to me, that's what galvanizing feels like. I'm like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like a salesman almost, and I feel it doesn't feel as genuine. Even though like one of my geniuses is wonder, and so I like vision casting a lot. But forcing people to do something that I don't know if they want to do is like, ooh, it feels weird to me. So that's why it's more of frustration. But totally makes sense the way you think about it, because then if that'll help me a little bit be like, okay, if I'm having trouble galvanizing, oh, I can kind of if I'm thinking and I do it in your perspective, it might help me a little bit. Versus enablement for me, I'm thinking like, oh, okay, I can see where people's potential, like individual potential is and where they need guidance, like for them specifically. So then it's like, okay, enabling is more of I know kind of how to navigate that a little bit more. And I feel like helpful in that sense. It's really just a perspective change. It like galvanizing, absolutely not. Like that's why I can't MC. That's why I can't. Yeah, those drain me immediately.
I see. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yep. Yep.
With the tenacity piece, that's the one that probably convicts me the most because I hate that I
Hmm.
don't have that. But I also
Uh-huh.
just have maybe tried to learn to embrace it. But like
Hmm.
so on the front end, I have endless energy to come up with new ideas. I'm always asking questions. Uh, and clearly you need someone like that on a team to keep coming up with new ideas and new
Yes.
solutions. But when it gets down, like even right now on my desktop, I have like 3 or 4 different papers that I've started to compile of potential books that I would love to write one day. And I just hope that I'll actually sit down and do it. But I like the idea, the research, uh, the initial vision is always so fun. And then when it gets down to, yeah, but now you have to actually like use good grammar and put things into order and actually like dot those I's. I often just, I'm already on to the next project at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm a tenacity genius, so which is funny. I
Nice.
have I have wonder and I have tenacity. So it's really
Okay.
funny. That's
Okay.
why usually when I'm starting projects, I always get stuck in the middle. And then I get really frustrated because I like can't get to like actually doing something. I'm like, at this point, can someone just tell me which option to choose and then I'll get it done. Like I'm the type of person where I'm like, okay, just tell me how to do it. And I don't even have to do it completely perfectly, but I will get it done by the deadline. So
Oh, that's interesting. Where is the
yeah,
I uh on your assessment?
the invention piece,
Yeah,
it's a competency. So
competent. Okay. So
yeah,
you're
so I have,
like, because
yes,
wonder
genius.
is seeing the opportunity. Invention is like coming up with a new idea. And then tenacity is the ability to actually finish that project to the very end. And
Hmm.
that's such a great, like, the bookend of being able to be high in wonder and tenacity. Uh, like, I mean, for someone like me, I would, if it's all up to me, I probably won't get very many things done. Like, I need some high genius tenacity folks to say, yeah, we can actually make this happen. It's not just up
All up
in
here,
your
1,000
dreams.
miles. Uh-huh. Yep,
Oh, that's great.
definitely. Yeah. So
Okay.
very cool. And then discernment and galvanizing. Yeah, those are frustrations for me.
Okay.
Very fun. Mhm.
Yeah. I like how this assessment, the reason why it feels so practical is if you even just look at in that order in that with that acronym widget, it's basically saying when you take a project, it goes from the very early, like it hasn't even been a formed idea yet. You're just kind of in the wonder invention stage to actually creating it, putting the systems in place, galvanizing people, and then finishing the project. And so that's like everything that we do in pretty much any field of work has to go from start to finish. But it's just it's an acknowledgement that no one can do the whole thing by themselves perfectly. Like this is why teams are so good, and so this is
Mhm.
just such a great way to apply that.
Yeah.
What are some, as you think about? So we have this cohort, some of
Mhm.
our awesome student leaders in InterVarsity, um, meeting for about 4 months, and it's the cohort is specifically to help them discern their future. Where is God calling them when they graduate? What are their skills and competencies and gifts that God's given them? And what kind of teammate would they be? What calling are they going into? All of that. Like as they're getting ready to graduate, thinking about all of that, how would this help them in that journey?
The first thing I can think of is self-awareness right off the bat. Whenever I have college students take this assessment or just try to figure out which ones they are, they always put more geniuses and more competencies, and they leave out the frustrations entirely. And I was like, "No, you're supposed to have 2, 2, and 2."
Mm,
So I
mm.
noticed that people don't realize that some of these things are very frustrating for them. So, like, that's it depends on, like, how you I don't know, maybe how you grew up and, like, different things like that, but for me, like, I was expected to be good at everything, and so I didn't even have the knowledge that I didn't like certain things, and so it was really hard for me to say yes or no to certain opportunities because I was like, "Well, I guess they're all good. I should just say yes to everything." And then but now I have the awareness to be like, "Okay, well, it's definitely not something that I thrive in." So then I'm like, at the majority of the time, because obviously every field, you're gonna have to do all of them at some point. At least I can if there's something that is just, like, really dead on my geniuses for the most part, it's like, "Okay, that seems like a good discernment piece wise, it's probably going in the right direction. Whether it's roles or jobs or just like ministry callings and things, it's very helpful.
Yeah, I like what you just said that every job you will do all of these in theory,
Hmm.
at least. Like it's not like you're going to find a job that for me, I guess it could be great. Like you're the wonder person and we're never going to have you do anything but just sit in a room and give us ideas. Although even I
Hmm.
would get bored of that. But I guess as I think, even looking at this for myself, what would, the spiritual practice, the approach be for me? Is this like, I notice my frustrations so that I can really dig in and get better at those? Or
Mm,
I try to cut those out of my life. Like, what's the balance? How do I actually pursue like a healthy approach to work, to my own development as I look at this?
mm. I mean, especially if you're working on teams, like with your frustrations, it's a lot easier to be honest, and there's no shame in saying like, "Hey, this is not my wheelhouse. Could you help me because you are very gifted in that?" And so it's nice because then you can approach it with humility and also not feel judged or bad that or guilty that you can't do these things at a very high level. At the same time, if you can identify other people who have those geniuses, then you can ask them like, "Hey, how do you think about it?" That's why like if I do have to do some galvanizing, like, "Hey, person that galvanizes very well, how do I do this better? Like how do you think about it?" So then when I do have to do it, I can at least turn it into maybe a competency a little bit more. At the end of the day, like there'll still be like areas where it's just you're just not gonna like it, even if you're like really good at it, or you have the quote unquote skills. So
Yeah.
yeah, trying to
Yeah,
think
I've
of other
noticed
things too.
there's something partly, I think, being in ministry, like in intervarsity ministry, you do
Hmm.
this long enough and you kind of have to fill every role at some point, where we are a bit
Hmm.
of like a jack of all trades sort of
Hmm.
organization. But that's true if you're going to be an entrepreneur and go start a business. I bet every entrepreneur has had to fill every one of those roles at some point. But it's really great to think about, if I really press into my strengths, my geniuses, and don't completely neglect my
Yeah,
frustrations. I like that they call them frustrations and not weaknesses, but also just recognize, if I'm in a role that is all about tenacity, it's just going to drain me and I'm not going to want to be there for very long. And so it's not that I can't do it. I've had to do it before, and you
right.
know, but it's that I probably want to find a role that fits my geniuses more than my frustrations.
Yeah, that makes sense. What was your what was your original question about like spiritually it's affecting you?
I was thinking about, so applying the working geniuses is a more of a workplace model, and we're also doing this in a Christian ministry. What kind of spiritual formation practices have you thought about connecting it to? Like, okay, I understand my working geniuses. I'm understanding myself more. How does that relate to my discipleship, my walk with God? Have you thought about on those lens? Do you have any
Mm,
insight for us?
mm, good question. Spiritual disciplines. I mean, there's a couple of ideas formulating, but like off the top of my head, if you like are doing a lot of scripture reading and everything, there's always I like finding when Jesus exhibits one of these geniuses and I'm like, "Oh, cool, Jesus." I mean, theoretically in my head, I'm like, "Okay, he covers all of them." And so I just find different stories of him galvanizing, him enabling, him idea casting vision and then getting things done too. And the way he does it, I'm like, "Okay, that gives me somewhat of, like, a biblical lens of, like, how do you do this where you're inviting, like, the Holy Spirit into whatever you're trying to accomplish or execute?" Sometimes I find those helpful, and then when I realize that I'm a wonder person, that I like visioning, I part of my it was slow, but part of my, like, spiritual development, I realized that I was like, I really like imaginative prayer because I just like being up here and, like, the dreaming, you know? So then my quiet times look more like there's a good chunk of that where that's my part of my quiet time versus, like, going through, a daily examine or something super yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I've not connected it to this before, but so my personal discipleship rhythm, I, for some reason, have never been able to follow like a more rigid devotional book. And always it's just been, I like to read scripture. And so I try to read through the whole Bible every year, but I've never found, someone else who wrote a book that's like every day you read this passage and then you read a little paragraph. That's a nice prayer. For some reason, it's just, and I wonder if that has to do with just the way I'm wired, more on the wonder imaginative side. I
Mhm,
like to be a little more free flowing and just allow my thoughts to go. But even as you were saying that too, for me, then a spiritual practice would be to make sure I have space in my time with God where I am imagining, where I'm pressing into those geniuses and allowing them to expand, because that would give me more life.
mhm.
And for someone else, that might be something different.
Yeah.
So that makes me think, so let's say if I have my working geniuses, but my current job doesn't actually fulfill some of that role, maybe this could become a little bit of a spiritual practice too. Like there are ways maybe you can't fulfill it perfectly in the first job that you get out of college.
Hmm.
And that's totally fine. Don't feel like I have to just not make any money until I find the perfect job. Like maybe you just
Yes.
start a job, but
Uh-huh.
you make sure to have in your rhythm a chance to maybe explore some of those other things. So you say, I'm going to spend 30 minutes a day in the wonder side of things. What could I be doing next? I'm going to make out my life plan in a way that I wouldn't have done if all I was doing was I just got to make a paycheck.
Hmm. Very
Do
true.
you think there's benefit on the spiritual discipline side to also incorporating a way to grow in my frustrations? Like, should we be focusing on those? Or should I just kind
Mm,
of say, no, that's a weakness. I'm never gonna, what do you think?
I think there is a beauty to bring your frustrations to God in a way where, so when I realized galvanizing wasn't my genius, I was like, okay, well, that means I just like can't preach. Or like but then he wasn't, like, limiting me in those ways. He's just like, "Okay, but then do it in a style where, like, that works for you." But also too, it's like, "Okay, but when you have those moments and when I'm asking you to do those things, press into that." Because sometimes you could have, like, a word for someone, but because your galvanizing thing is keeping you from sharing that, then it could become an issue, I think, maybe.
Mm.
I don't know how true that is, but at least that example, it could be. So, like discernment, I'm just so bad at discernment. I'm just not never gonna make a decision again. Like, no, especially if it's like a big, big decision. But then at the same time, it's like usually God will be like, hey, let me. So then in my prayer, I'll be like, hey, God, bring some people into my life that can help me with this particular discernment piece because I would rather pull my hair out than sit and discern for like 2 minutes.
No, that's good. The insight I just heard you say is you don't feel like like for me, I don't have to feel like overnight I have to just become a genius at the things that I'm not a genius
Hmm.
at.
Right.
But also, especially being in tune with God's voice to say, I don't always feel like I'm a galvanizer, but right now I'm supposed to fill this role. It makes
Hmm.
it's like the famous line from Esther, for such a time as this. There's going to be times when I look around and I'm the only one that can finish this task. I just have to do it, right?
Hmm.
For this,
Hmm.
as I serve my community or my family or whatever, like I'm the guy. I got to be tenacity today and or
Hmm.
galvanizer. And so to be open to that and allow God to say, yeah, today is a day of stretching. You're going to do this, but maybe not feel like the pressure to like, this is all I have to do now. Like I can actually
Hmm.
thrive in some of these other spots as well. So,
Right, exactly. I don't know if it's like a good Moses example where it's like, well, he clearly was not a gifted speaker, but God was like, "Hey," and then he helped him out. But there are some times where like you do have to say some things, like I have to share at church for like fundraising and when I'd rather not, and that's full on galvanizing, but
right,
like who else is gonna do it?
right. Oh, the Moses, that's a great example though. Moses tried very hard to say, God, you've got the wrong
Mhm,
guy. And God just kept,
mhm.
there's going to be times where God's like, no, you
Yeah.
are the right person for this. That's
And what's
great.
nice is that when you do your like work in your frustration, it's not going to be pristine, it's not going to be perfect. But if God actually makes something work out of you pushing through your frustrations, that means he like really worked because
Mm,
whenever I go up and I'm not the greatest galvanizer and I galvanize and God still does something through someone who's not a good galvanizer, then I know it was all God and not me. So yeah.
amen. That's great. Well, what kind of encouragement do you have for students who are getting into this, and just for our leaders in InterVarsity? What are your hopes and prayers for them as they think about learning about themselves through this assessment?
Mm, I would say two things. One is be honest with the assessment and be honest with yourself and with God. And if you're still have questions or like you're still wondering, like, I don't actually know. And that it could be like, yeah, you might need some time to like get to know yourself better, and that takes time too, and if it changes a little bit and you change your mind the next day because you realize that it's actually one thing and not the other, that is totally okay. And then, yeah, you're not, like, stuck to, like, "I took the assessment once, therefore, this is me, and, like, I'm gonna put myself into this box." Because I mean, it really is just an assessment. It's not this holistic, thing. So, it's probably only a subset of who you are. And then the second thing was probably just stuff that I mentioned before too, just not feeling like you're boxed into this assessment, but actually continue to to know yourself further than the assessment because God's created you in like a very multifaceted way. And so this is just one of many things. So getting to know God better will also help you to get to
Yeah.
know yourself better.
That is a really good spiritual reminder, I think, pastoral reminder, because I think I've seen this tendency with all of these different assessments. It's like people they latch onto their favorite one, whether it's, Enneagram, Myers, whatever it is. And it's like, well, that's who I am now. When really this
Hmm.
is just one lens to understand a part of you, and you're still bigger, that you're more expansive than this little widget here, but it is a helpful, practical tool. Yeah.
Yes, that's it.
Well,
I agree.